Hello, good evening, everyone. This is a reading practice for the C2 proficiency level. Paper 1. You're going to read an extract from a newspaper article. 7 paragraphs have been removed from the extract. Choose from the paragraphs A to H the one which fits each gap 1 to 7. There is one extra paragraph which you do not need to use. From the spring of 1907 through the fall of 1908, the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railroad line lumbered through the Dakotas and into Montana. From the top of any hill, one could have seen its course through the badlands, the lines of horse-drawn wagons, the heaps of broken rock for the roadbed, the debris, the gangs of laborers, engineers, surveyors. From a distance, the construction of the new line looked like a battlefield. It was a duplicate of the last. Main Street was a downhill line of boxes, wood, and brick, laid out on the prairie transverse to the railroad line. The boxes housed a post office, a hotel, a saloon, a general store, a saddlery, a barber shop, a church, a bank, a schoolhouse, and a jail. Beside the line, sites were staked out from the grain elevator and the stockyard. A few dilapidated shacks, and the shabby city was done. Photographed from the proper angle with railroad workers for citizens, it could be promoted as the commonplace in the New West. As the railroads pushed farther west into open range land that grew steadily drier and steadily emptier, the rival companies clubbed together to sponsor an extraordinary body of popular literature. For the increasingly inhospitable land to be settled by the masses of people needed to sustain the advance of the railroads, it had to be made palpable. Railroad writers and illustrators were assigned to come up with a new picture of free, rich farmland, a picture so attractive that readers would commit their families and their life savings to it, sight unseen. They dangled before the reader the prospect of fantastic self improvement, of riches going begging for the want of claimants. The terms of the enlarged Homestead Act, passed in Congress in 1909, were generous. The size of a government homestead of semi arid lands like that of eastern Montana was doubled from a quarter section to a half section, 160 acres to 320 acres. It was an outstanding free offer by any reckoning, and no homesteader could resist it. The land had been granted to the family forever on April 27, 1917, under the presidential seal of Woodrow Wilson. We had a photograph taken sometime in the late 30s. In the chemical gloaming of underexposure stands a trim two-story farmhouse with barns and outbuildings. We expected to find the place in ruins, but there wasn't so much as the ruin of a ruin in sight. Of course, converged with a drop green rift of cottonwoods along Old Fallon Creek. We were lucky because the first week of June 1995 had brought perfect spring weather to the prairie, a stroke of luck, for we were seeing it as the homesteaders saw it during the first Montana spring. They arrived in a run of moist years 1910, 1911, 1912, and the land and its heyday was living up to its descriptions in the railroad pamphlets. Then the weather broke, giving the settlers the first taste of the pitiless extreme character of the Montana climate and the winter cold. Montana's violent climate came with the territory. In 1917, barely 5 inches of rain fell between May and August, and the harvest was disappointingly thin. Most people were baffled and frightened by the disastrous turn in the weather. They had been assured by the government, by scientists, by the railroad literature that this couldn't happen. He agreed to rent the farm on a year-by-year basis to a young couple named Schumacher. He sold them his stock. Then Ned packed the Ford until it resembled a toppling haystack of assorted household goods, and in March that year he and Dora sadly drove west.